Hi, grade sevens. Today we are going to read chapter 10 of Braiding Sweetgrass for young adults, and it is called The Three Sisters. Plants tell their stories not by what they say, but what they do. They speak in a tongue that every breathing being can understand. Plants teach in a universal language, which is food. For millennia, from Mexico to Michigan, women have mounded up the earth and laid these three seeds in the ground, all in the same square foot of soil. When the colonists of Massachusetts shore first saw indigenous gardens, they inferred that the savages did not know how to farm. To their minds, a garden meant straight rows of single species, not a three-dimensional sprawl of abundance. And yet they ate their fill and asked for more and more again. Three seeds. Years ago, Mary Lou Awikata, a Cherokee writer, pressed a small packet into my hand. It was a corn leaf, dry and folded into a pouch, tied with a little bit of string. She smiled. "Don't open it until spring." In May, I untie the pack and there is a gift. 3 seeds. One is a golden triangle, a kernel of corn with a broadly dimpled top that narrows to a hard white tip. The glossy bean is speckled brown, curved and sleek, the inner belly marked with a white eye, the hilum. And then there is a pumpkin seed like an oval china dish, its edge crimped shut. I hold it in my hand, the genius of the indigenous agriculture, the Three Sisters. Together these plants, corn, beans, and squash, feed the people, feed the land, and feed our imaginations, telling us how we might live. Planted together, they offer an example of harmony, balance, and reciprocity. Once planted in the May moist earth, the corn seeds take over water quickly. The seed coat is thin and its starchy contents, the endosperm, draw water to it. The moisture activates enzymes under the skin that slice the starch into sugars and fuel the growth of the corn embryo. Corn is the first to emerge from the ground, a slender white spike that greens within hours of finding the light. A single leaf unfurls, and then another. Corn is all alone at first, while the others are getting ready. Drinking in soil water, the bean seed swells and bursts the speckled coat and sends a rooting down deep in the ground. Only after the root is secured does the stem bend in the shape of a hook and elbow its way above ground. Beans can take their time finding the light because their first leaves were already packaged in 2 halves of the bean seed. This pair of fleshy leaves breaks the soil surface to join the corn, which is already 6 inches tall. Together, these plants, corn, beans, and squash, feed the people, feed the land, and feed our imaginations, telling us how we might live. Pumpkin and squash take their time. It may be weeks before the first stem pokes up, still caught in their seed coat until the leaves split and the seams break free. I'm told that our ancestors would put the squash seeds in a deerskin bag with a little water or urine a week before planting to hurry them along. But each plant has their own pace, and the sequence of their germination, their birth order, is important to their relationship and to the success of the crop. The corn is first born and must grow tall quickly, making a strong stem is the highest priority at first. They need to be there for their younger sister, the bean. Beans put out a pair of heart-shaped leaves just as the stub of the stem, then another pair, and then another, all low to the ground. The bean focuses on leaf growth while the corn concentrates on height. Just above the time that the corn is knee-high, the bean shoot changes her mind, as middle children are known to do. Instead of making leaves, she extends herself in a long vine. In this teenage phase, hormones sent the shoot tip to wandering, inscribing a circle in the air, a process known as circumtonation. The tip can travel 3 feet or 1 meter in a day, circling until it finds what it's looking for, a corn stem or some other vertical support. Touch receptors along the vine guide it to wrap around the corn in a graceful upward spiral. For now, the bean holds back on making leaves, giving herself over to the embracing the corn, keeping pace with their height growth. Had the corn not started early, the bean vine would strangle the corn, but if the timing is right, the corn can easily carry the bean. Meanwhile, the squash, the late bloomer of the family, is steadily extending herself over the ground, moving away from the corns and beans, setting up broad-lobed leaves like a stand of umbrellas. These leaves and vines are distinctly bristly, causing nibbling caterpillars to have second thoughts. Native people speak of this gardening style as the Three Sisters. There are many stories of how they came to be, but they all share the understanding of these plants as women, sisters. Some stories tell of a long winter when the people were dropping from hunger. Three beautiful women came to their dwellings on a snowy night. One was a tall woman dressed in yellow with long flowing hair. The second wore green, and the third was robed in orange. The three came inside to shelter by the fire. Food was scarce, but the visiting strangers were fed generously, sharing in the little that people had left. In gratitude for their generosity, the three sisters revealed their true identities, corns, bean, and squash, and gave themselves to the people in a bundle of seeds so they may never go hungry again. At the height of summer, when the days are long and bright, the lesson of reciprocity are written clearly in the Three Sisters' garden. Together, their stems inscribe what looks to me like a blueprint for the world, a map of balance and harmony. The corn stands 8 feet tall. Rippling green ribbons of leaf curl away from the stem in every direction to catch the sun. No leaf sits directly over the next, so that each can gather light without shading the others. The bean twines around the cornstalk, weaving itself between the leaves of corn, never interfering with their work. In the spaces where corn leaves are not, buds appear on the vining bean and expand into outstretched leaves and clusters of fragrant flowers. The bean leaves droop and are held close to the stem of the corn. Spread about the feet of the corn and beans is a carpet of big, broad squash leaves that intercept the light that falls among the pillars of corn. Their layered spaces use the light, a gift from the sun, efficiently, with no waste. The organic symmetry of forms belongs together. The placement of every leaf, the harmony of shapes speak their message. Respect one another, support one another, bring your gift to the world and receive the gift of others, and there will be enough for all. By late summer, the beans hang in heavy clusters of smooth green pods, ears of corn angle out from the stalk, fattening in the sunshine, and pumpkins swell at your feet. Acre for acre, a Three Sisters garden yields more food than if you grew each of the sisters alone. You can tell they are sisters. One twines easily around the other in a relaxed embrace while the sweet baby sister lolls at their feet, close but not too close, cooperating, not competing. Seems to me I've seen this before in human families, in the interplay of sisters. After all, there are 3 girls in my family. The firstborn girl knew that she is clearly in charge, tall, direct, and efficient. She creates the template for everyone else to follow. That's the corn sister. There's not room for more than 1 corn woman in the same house, so the middle sister, the beans, learns to be flexible and adaptable and finds way around the older sister to get the light that she needs. The sweet baby sister is free to choose a different path. Well-grounded, she has nothing to prove and finds her own way, a way that contributes to the group as a whole. Without the corn support, the beans would be unruly, tangled on the ground, vulnerable to bean-hungry predators. It might seem as if she is taking a free ride in this garden, benefiting from the corn's height and the squash's shade, but by the rules of reciprocity, none can take more than she gives. The corn takes care of making light available. The squash reduces weeds. What about the beans? To see her gift, you have to look underground. The sisters cooperate above ground with the placement of their leaves, carefully avoiding one another's space. The same is true below ground. Corn is classified as a monoculture, and when you shake the soil off the roots, they look like a stringy mop head at the end of a cornstalk handle. They make a shallow network, calling first dibs on the rain. After they've had their drink, the water descends out of their reach. As the water goes deeper, the taproots of the bean absorb the water. The squash finds their share by moving away from the others. Wherever a squash stem touches soil, they can put out a tuft of adventurous roots, collecting water far from the corn and bean roots. They share the soil by the same techniques that they share the light, leaving enough for everyone. There is one thing they all need that is always in short supply: nitrogen. The problem is that most plants simply can't use atmospheric nitrogen. They need mineral nitrogen, nitrate, or ammonium. The The nitrogen in the atmosphere might as well be food locked away in full sight of a starving person. But legumes, which is the family the beans are a part of, have the remarkable ability to take nitrogen from the atmosphere and turn it into usable nutrients, but they don't do it alone. My students often run to me with a handful of roots from a bean they've unearthed with a little white ball clinging to strands of the root. "Is this a disease?" they ask. "Is something wrong with these roots?" I reply that there's something very right. These glistening nodules house the rhizobium bacteria, the nitrogen fixers. However, rhizobium can only convert nitrogen under a special set of circumstances. Its catalytic enzymes will not work in the presence of oxygen. Since the average handful of soil is more than 50% airspace, the rhizobium needs a refuge to do its work, the bean. When the bean root meets a microscopic rod of rhizobium underground, chemical communications are enhanced and the deal is negotiated. The bean will grow in an oxygen-free nodule to house the bacterium, and in return, the bacterium shares its nitrogen with the plant. Together, they create a nitrogen fertilizer that enters the soil and fuels the growth of the corn and the squash too. There are layers upon layers of reciprocity in this garden. It's tempting to imagine that these three are deliberate in working together, and perhaps they are, but the beauty of the partnership is that each plant does what it does to increase its own growth. As it happens, when the individuals flourish, so does the whole. The way of the three sisters reminds me of one of the basic teachings of our people. Individuality is cherished and nurtured because, for the whole to flourish, each of us have to be strong in who we are and carry our gifts with conviction, so they can be shared with others. The most important thing each of us can know is our unique gift is how to use it in the world. Being among the sisters provides a visible manifestation of what a community can become when its members understand and share their gifts. And in reciprocity, we fill our spirits as well as our bellies. The genius of the three sisters lies not only in the process by which they are able to grow, but also how they complement one another at the kitchen table. They taste good together and they form a nutritional triad that sustains us. Corn is a superb form of starch. All summer she turns sunshine into carbohydrates so that all winter people can have food energy. But corn is not nutritionally complete. By virtue of their nitrogen-fixing capacity, beans are high in protein and fill the nutritional gaps left by corn. A person can live well on a diet of beans and corn. Neither alone would be sufficient. But neither beans nor corn have the vitamins that squash provide in their keratin-rich flesh. Together, they are once again greater than when they are alone. The sisters offer us a new metaphor for emerging relationships between indigenous knowledge and Western science, both of which are rooted in the earth. I think of corn as a traditional ecological knowledge, the physical and spiritual framework that can guide the curious being of science. The squash creates the ethical habitat for coexistence and mutual flourishing. I envision a time when the intellectual monoculture of science will be replaced with the polyculture of complementary knowledges. Then all may be fed. In indigenous agriculture, the practice is to modify the plants to fit the land. As a result, there are many varieties of corn domesticated by our ancestors, all adapted to grow in many different places. Modern agriculture, with its big engines and fossil fuels, took the opposite approach. They modified the land to fit the plants, which are frighteningly similar clones. On summer evenings, I sit with my friends and look out over the millions of corn plants in the valley, standing shoulder to shoulder with no beans, no squash, and scarcely a weed in sight. These are my neighbors' fields, and I've seen the many passes with a tractor that produce such a clean field. Tank sprayers deliver applications of fertilizer that you most definitely smell in the spring. A dose of ammonium nitrate substitutes for the partnership of the bean. The tractor returns with herbicides to suppress weeds in lieu of the squash leaves. Yes, there were certainly bugs and weeds back when these valleys were the three sister gardens, and yet they flourished without insecticides. Polycultures, fields with many species of plants, are less susceptible to pest outbreaks than monocultures. The diversity of plant forms provides habitats for a wide array of insects. Some, like corn earworms, bean beetles, and squash borers, are there with the intent of feeding the crop, but the diversity of the plants also creates a habitat for insects who eat the crop eaters. Predatory beetles and parasitic wasps coexist with the garden and keep the crop eaters under control. More people are fed by this garden, and there is enough to go around. I want the three sisters to know that we've heard their story. Use your gift to take care of one another, work together, and all will be fed, they say. They've all brought their gifts to this table, but they've not done it alone. They remind us that there is another partner in the symbiosis. They are sitting here at the table and across the valley in the farmhouse too. The one who noticed the way of each species and imagined how they might live together. Perhaps we should consider this a Four Sisters garden. The planter is also an essential partner. We are the planters, the ones who clear the land, pull the weeds, pick the bugs, and save the seeds over winter to plant them again in the spring. We cannot live without them, but it's also true that they cannot live without us. Corn, beans, and squash are fully domesticated. They rely on us to create the conditions under which they can grow. We too are a part of the reciprocity. They can't meet their responsibilities unless we meet ours.